that has to kind of bring a little bit of
Do
that
you have chewing gum?
the
Admit it.
spice.
You brought chewing gum.
The chewing gum.
I
No,
will.
man.
I will bring
this,
the energy.
this
Hello,
psychopathic
everyone.
desire to like spit on the street, right?
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan back here for episode 95 of the Three Body Problem. We have a special guest joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia. A name that we've dropped on this podcast multiple times, talking about this industry space. The legendary Mark Dowd. How are you, Mark?
Hi, how's it going?
Oh my gosh, that's all we get?
Don't put the man on the spot. He's just we're happy he's here. You gotta
Mark, you're now
be
director. You're now director at I would say a new company called Vigilant Labs.
Wait,
Can we start
sorry,
right there?
I dropped out there for a second.
Are you here?
Yeah. So Vigilant Labs is we do vulnerability research for government agencies and stuff like that. It's been going for about three and a half years now, and we grew relatively quickly. So we've got people in Australia and the US, and some in like a few other places such as Western Europe, and yeah, just like doing research. I guess not dissimilar to what Azimuth was doing previously.
Okay, so it's more or less the same thing. Are you guys focused in a specific area of research, or is it a broad software exploitation?
We have a fairly broad set of things that we're looking into, but primarily we focus on things such as mobile and desktop exploitation. But we're doing a couple of other things as well, including some defensive work.
Okay. Is this the first time you were in the defensive space?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I worked at McAfee, so.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You have a long and kind of storied career arc in cybersecurity. I mean, I remember covering stories that you were doing from Black Hat Talks years ago, all the way back to the old ISS X-Force days, writing the book, The Art of Software Security with John McDonnell and Justin. When you think back to those days, the early 90s, getting into cybersecurity and where we are today, did you visualize we'd be here?
Not really. Like, it's pretty funny because when I first got into hacking and stuff, it was pretty much an IRC hobbyist group, a very small collection of people. And I sort of thought at the time, like, oh, this will be a hobby on the side and I'll just be some software developer or something. But things escalated very quickly, which in retrospect is very obvious that security would become pretty important. But like, it went from a fairly small and niche interest group in the early part of my interest and career into the cybersecurity massive industry that we see today, both in the defensive and tech space and governments and so forth. There's been a lot of, I think, cultural shifts that were brought on by both perhaps an influx of money in various places and also technology waves that have driven the need for security and similarly the need for offensive research in that space.
Interesting. Before you guys can jump in and kind of weigh in, but I just wanted to pick.
Man, you're doing great. You're doing great. You just knock yourself out.
No, the earliest days of Azimuth. At what point, and what was the catalyst for you to determine, hey, there's a business here? I'm the guy who's going to do that.
So obviously we weren't the first people doing offensive research, but we did become one of the major players, I suppose. Funnily, when we started Azimuth, we were doing defensive work. I actually did like the first 6 months of Azimuth, I did a contract on Chrome Sandbox. and we did a couple of other defensive jobs, but like we came from a vulnerability research background, and that was a more appealing space for us. We didn't really know how to get into it, and we didn't aggressively pursue it initially. I was aware that I kind of wanted to do it, but I thought as an entire business model, it would be too stressful, which I can report is correct. But I kind of thought, oh, we'll probably do a bit of it on the side in between contracts or something like that. That sort of changed when we made our first initial like real contacts in the space. And we got to do work that we enjoyed doing. It was the cutting edge of research. And just as importantly, and perhaps even more importantly, there was no conference calls or anything. There's no calls. There's comparatively little paperwork. There's not like 40-page documents like when you do application assessments. It's just like, here's a thing that works. And they're like, great. And you're like, amazing.
So the fun part of it was, there were some fun elements of it that pushed you in that direction. You talked about the stressful parts of it. Can you linger there a little bit about like when you're in this business? Obviously, it's controversial. Obviously, there's differing opinions on the ethics of it and getting involved in it. When you talk about the stresses of it, is that what you're referring to?
There's a couple of stresses related to doing this kind of work as a business. One of them that all researchers feel, even the ones in nominally defensive teams, is there's a pressure on you to sort of produce something which you don't know that exists, and to consistently do that. So that is a lingering stress. And if you're on the offensive side, you've got to worry about those things being patched and like your last however much work just, becoming obsolete overnight, and you having to perhaps replace it or do whatever. So that's one of the primary stresses of working in this market.
Just having a successful product. Just because of the nature of it, things get burned, things get patched, that kind of thing. It's just constantly stressful.
Kind of continuity in your business, having the ability to grow, and then there's other stresses that are less important, but I guess less stressful on the day-to-day, but still contribute. So things such as security concerns of devices all the time and all that kind of thing. So
like your own OpSec.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So yeah, like it's a pretty stressful kind of area to be in. I'm sure a lot of other industries have their own different kinds of stress. We had one guy from our old work, and not long after I left Trenchant, he left and joined the computer games industry, and then came back into vulnerability research about 5 years later, and he's like, oh man,
the stresses are the same
kind of stress, but it's pretty hectic.
Wait,
does it get easier over time?
The fuck, was the games thing worse or like vulnerability
he said it was very stressful in different ways to vulnerability research. So yeah,
nothing is safe.
Yeah, it did sound. He described some of it, and it did sound brutal in ways that we don't really have to worry about.
Juanito, you got a question?
Bro, they're just like, there's nowhere to go. Like, what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Okay, well, let me ask a bunch of questions.
And, like,
let me ask a bunch of things that's been on my mind, and then we can kind of float it into the conversation. I want to go back to a little bit about Vigilant Labs. Like, what is the specific gap not being addressed by, let's say, Trenchant and the other shops that you guys are addressing? Are you focused in any specific area? I know you mentioned mobile and desktop, but is there like an offensive security space gap that you're filling?
So I can give you like the background into why I wanted to start it and things like that, which I think might help give the answer to this question. After I left Trenchant, I had more or less a year off, although half of it was in COVID. During that time, apart from it being rather depressing, not working as it turns out, I did a series of keynote presentations for various conferences where I was talking about a few things, but primarily one was about the offensive market at the time, and the second was about where I thought offensive research was going. And I had a few ideas about where I thought it was going and what the next generation of things we needed to focus on or perhaps look at might look like. And after a while, I'm like, well, maybe I should put my money where my mouth is and try out some of these things. So it's not like we're addressing something that no one else is addressing necessarily. It's that I wanted to help innovate in the space of what the next generation of attack vectors and exploit strategies and stuff looked like in the face of growing mitigations and changing technology usage patterns and so forth. And some of those things we've done really well. A couple of them we've I'm like, we need to work harder in this space, and then also of course with the advent of AI more recently, it's kind of like thrown a lot of things into disarray, which we were vaguely aware of, I guess, around the time of starting Vigilant, but it was way less obvious if it was going to get much better and over what time frame.
And
What does the AI thing look like? Right, just to cut in there, right? Because you kind of beat us to the punch in a lot of ways, but if you watch the show recently, the Mythos thing is like a nonstop sort of carousel around here, and obviously they're pushing all of this AI capability on the basis of vulnerability research. And I think at some point somebody did actually say, it's like, you get Mark Dowd in a box, right? Like Mark Dowd as a service. You go, well, that's okay. Well, Mark, now that you're here, right? Like, what the fuck's the deal there? Like, what does it look like on your end actually doing vuln research?
does it feel existential to you? Like you're like the actual vulnerability researcher feels existential at all?
Sorry, what was that, Ryan?
No, I was just curious, just to put a bow on Juan's question is, do you feel like the narrative here is that vulnerability researchers are disappearing because of AI? Mythos is doing the vulnerability research all the way through exploitation, and guys are feeling like, this is an existential threat to me as a vulnerability researcher.
Well, first of all, if they're calling it Mark Dowd in a box, that seems specifically bad for me, and really quite unfairly targeted, I might add. But I think
Might be able to sue for that. Is all.
Yeah. Actually, Dave Eitel did a keynote like a year or two ago when he was first talking about codex security, and he's like, yeah, we're doing this project Aardvark, and he was like, oh, he also mentioned me. He's like, oh, this is going to be like Mark. And I was just kind of thinking like, well, you should have called it Aardmark then, but neither here nor there.
Nicely done.
To answer the question, like, AI is obviously a massive disruption for not just our industry, but the entire software and probably broader knowledge-based industries. And the technology for it improves markedly in very short spaces of time. So many people over the last few years, I feel like, have tried it out and gone, oh, it's really good at this, but then they're like, oh, it's actually terrible at this, and then form that opinion about it. But if you go and try it again 3, 6, 12 months later, it is like a dramatically different
It's two different
product,
things, yeah.
and quite a lot better. So it's obviously getting pretty good at vulnerability research, but at the same time, I feel like when a large technology comes along, it creates disruption and potential for displacing jobs and stuff, but it also creates interesting opportunities. You have the ability to do things dramatically more efficiently or more at scale than you've ever done before. It might open up vectors that before were too time consuming, too arduous, required too much manpower compared to what you could potentially generate out of it. And so while some aspects of vulnerability research I think will be swallowed by AI, it also creates the opportunity to use it as a force multiplier to expand your ability to do vulnerability research or indeed software development, etc.
And Mark, if you don't mind me asking, can you say, if you can say, how much are you guys using AI in your workflows? Do you integrate with AIs like, I don't know, Mythos, or do you use local models? Like, for instance, I'm trying to use both, and constantly I see that local models obviously don't have the same performance as the Frontier Labs, but they can be useful for smaller tasks, and at least you don't leak whatever you're working on to these guys. So can you talk a bit about that, if you
Yeah,
guys use AI?
So we're very interested in forward-leaning into AI and using it, and also just learning the technology in depth, because very obviously you have to adapt to this one way or the other, or you're in big trouble in a short period of time. Firstly, I've not used Mythos, but if Anthropic would like to forward it to me, I'll give it a bash. Like, just put my email at the bottom and send me a login, and I'll give it a shot. The local models is something that is interesting. So we use both frontier and local models for different tasks and so forth. But the local model space is really interesting to me because, partly for the reason that you've stated, but also when we talk about the advances in AI technology, everyone talks about the advances of the Frontier Labs, and they are, of course, state of the art and so forth. But the technology going into making decent and quite good LLMs available on a manageable amount of compute is epic. And like the frontier models, every 2 or 3 weeks, something crazy happens. If you follow that kind of stuff, a lot of models are coming out all the time that are really interesting. Recently, there was everyone was talking about Minimax for a while, and then Gemma 4 was outperforming models far larger than it. And then that was followed by Kimi 2.6 today or yesterday or something. But beyond those, there was also Google dropped TurboQuant, which promised dramatic improvements in efficiency of both speed and memory. And then some of the stuff I was looking at today, for example, the DFlash MLX, if you've ever looked at that, which is looking at using diffusion to basically predict a series of tokens rather than just a single token, again, aimed at large efficiency gains. And these are just a small sample of some of the technologies that we have. And I think also regarding both local and frontier models, because a lot of the capabilities are coming along so quickly, and we're getting hit in the face with them all the time, quite a lot of getting the most out of them, there's quite a lot of work to do in that space still. And so that's why I'm interested in learning not just hey, how do we make this LLM find a bug or whatever, but how do these technologies work, and are we really using them the best way that we can, or are we just wasting excessive amounts of tokens or compute on something that we don't need to be? To try and I'm trying currently at my work to push an AI first sort of company where we use AI to further our institutional knowledge and tooling and so forth. And I actually had an all hands today where I said as much. But I mean, to this topic as well, it was part of the reason why I don't know if you saw, like a week or so ago, I announced that we'll be doing a conference in Sydney specifically about AI and cybersecurity.
Unprompted Australia, right? You're bringing the Unprompted brand over there to do a similar conference, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like, we're about to do the call for paper and everything, but like one of the reasons is I'm very interested in getting a lot of technical expertise in both offense and defense, and also actually I'm quite interested in trying to grab a few speakers that are not necessarily security people, but AI technologists that are doing work that I think is interesting. And then, as a lesser but also contributing factor, I thought, like, well, we don't have a major conference in Sydney, and I think it'd be cool to do apart from anything else. So.
Costin, you got the answer to your question?
I wanted just to do another follow-up question for Mark when he's back.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if the night caught up with you.
It's night, right? It's already
really
night.
Quickly. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thanks for the answer. I wanted to ask kind of follow-up question. How useful do you find the AI models in the implementation phase? So let's say you find a bug or a vulnerability or a chain of events which could potentially lead to an exploit. Do you find that AI is like really useful for you more in the implementation phase? Like just say, hey, write me an exploit for this thing, and it just writes you the exploit? Or is it more like in the finding phase, and then you take care of fine-tuning and writing the path, the exploit itself? So what is it more useful to you?
Yeah, right. So this very much depends on exactly what you're trying to find and what you're trying to write. My goal is generally to deploy AI in situations where we need reasoning, but to have that reasoning as defined as possible, because in my experience, the more vague you are about, hey, just find a bug, or hey, just write an exploit for this, the more likely you're going to waste a whole bunch of time and effort and perhaps
tokens.
Money. Having something bash its head against the wall and not really be able to make any progress. And so one of the things that firstly I try and do is think, first of all, is there any part of this process that I can make dumber? That's at the forefront. I try and always keep that in the forefront of my mind. Which bits can I automate that do not actually require an LLM to be reasoning over? Because I want the LLM to reason, but I want to firstly remove as much guesswork away from the LLM as possible. And you can do that by using things like static analysis tools and so forth to give it as much context as possible, and save burning through tokens or whatever, but also not wasting time having an LLM trying to reason about something that you already know the answer to, or you can mechanically give it an answer to. This is, again, I wouldn't really consider myself an AI expert. This is my philosophy based on my testing with the things that I've done and what seems to work and what doesn't. And the other thing that I think is important that I try and push is another philosophy that I think is important is for me, we don't want to lose information wherever possible. In vulnerability research, we tend to lose information all the time down the side. So like when you're doing, for example, an audit of something and you're like, oh, that's interesting. This can happen or this. And then you might remember that next time you look, or you might not. Like depends how good you are at note taking or how well you know the code base and so forth. I want to remember everything, and I want to tell the LLM going in next time I look at it, these are all of the interesting things that I know about already. Consider these things that you can deploy in your solution, kind of thing. So my goal there is to gain efficiency by building institutional knowledge that we can reuse, and also to give it all the tools that it needs to get the fullest picture possible for any reasoning that it has to do. So to write an exploit or find a bug, generically, I'm not sure what the answer is. My goal is to do something smaller than that, which is to pick a particular thing. Hopefully, it works best in my experience as something that I already know the internal workings of quite well. To reason through a few things that I already know about, to pick a subset perhaps of the code to look at, the type of vulnerabilities to look at, and so on. And the same for developing exploits. Like maybe this can't generically develop an exploit on everything right now, but who cares? We can get it to do some part of it for this class of exploits, and that's a great efficiency gain. And then we can build on that later. So that's kind of the philosophy I have.
You mentioned having an all hands and talking to your own company about AI usage. I just recommended this. Dan Guido did a talk at the last Unprompted conference around building his company Trail of Bits as an AI native company and kind of setting up the success criteria and so on. Not just giving people tools and say, hey, go use these tools, but making it a deep, deep part of what the company is. Is that what you're talking about there? Are you guys leaning into this heavily? And the flip side to that, is there anything surprised you at all about how AI is going to change your business? Anything along the way that jumps out as a surprise to you?
Yeah, so I did see Dan Guido's presentation, and I thought a lot of the ideas in it were really good. And I think the attitude that he was conveying is a good one. Essentially, you've got to harness this technology, and it's way better to be on the forefront of it than kind of ignore it for another year or two and then go, Jesus, what are we going to do? You know. So
that's where you are right now, right? You're in this mode of like, let's lean in and get ramped to this because you don't want to be caught there a year from now.
That's, yeah. Like, I think, like I said, ignoring it or not really giving it the full attention it deserves is a risky proposition. But also, like I said, it creates opportunities as well as potential problems. So, and I think the best way to identify those opportunities is to firstly be fairly fluent with the technology, so using it all the time, because experience is a great teacher. So that's going to teach you, like, you know what, before I started getting into this, I pretty much thought it was going to do this, but actually it sucks at this, but it's really pretty good at this other thing. So I think just having the day-to-day experience like that to find out what works and what doesn't work is really good. And secondly, like taking some time to try and understand the technologies that underpin LLMs and so forth is something that, again, if you gain a deeper understanding of the technology, you will more correctly, I think, understand what the limitations are and whether your shooting in the wrong direction, or you're like, we can actually do far more in this space and than I thought before. So yeah, we're very much in that space where I'm trying to encourage that within our culture, I would say.
It's sort of fascinating. I mean, you mentioned, right, that how quickly these things change. And I had an experience like that actually this week where, I mean, I've been fairly like AI pilled and, you know, spend all my time using these things. And my CEO, Tomer, pings me and he's like he's like using Claude Code, going at like an NVR solution like in his house. And he's like, dude, like there's some fucking devil.bin, like there's this thing in like the firmware, it's super weird. And I'm like, okay, send it to me. And like it's encrypted. I literally just like I threw it at Claude Code, I threw it at one of these like codex models and just like let them both cook. I was fascinated by how much things have advanced since I last tried something like this, right? And somebody I think it was like Bruce Dang or somebody was like, hey, you know, tell Jags that like these things can do the black box side of it. And I'm like, I mean, I knew they could, but I was amazed at how much they have progressed. Like it figured out,
Right.
you know, it's like, look, the thing's encrypted, but it still has this structure. It's looking at the entropy because like, and I can see it using these like tools on the terminal to start doing the triage. And after a bit, it's like, okay, well, like kind of hit the limit of what it can do statically. And it's like, I can write a disassembler and I'm like, stop, here's IDA. And it's like, oh, perfect. It loaded up IDA. And it just started to just tear through this fucking sample. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to need the firmware to figure out how to decrypt it. So it found it, it downloaded it, it went through the firmware, it figured out where this thing got decrypted. It decrypted the binary, it loaded into IDA again. I'm like, Jesus, I just sat there and I watched two different models do this on their own, decrypt the full thing and tell me like, oh yeah, this is clearly like a backdoor in like drop bear SSH. And you go,
Right.
what the fuck, man? This was 15 minutes of tokens, and like the amount of work we used to put into something like that. It was
it's
fun, it
basically
was
a
cool,
talk.
but yeah, exactly. Like it's a full like, you know, we're like, well, do you write a blog or do you just kind of let the thing like, was it going to tweet it
Yeah.
out by itself, or like, what do you do?
It's pretty wild. Like when I remember the first time I used Cursor, which was not really that long ago. It was like 2 or 3 years. I can't remember. And I was like blown away. I remember writing a relatively simple tool, but it would have taken me ages because it involved. I would have had to learn some REST API for something that I didn't know how to use, you know, etc. And like it did all this stuff, but what fascinated me more than writing the code, because I knew it would do that, was the code. It ran the code and it totally didn't work. And then it goes, oh, let me just fix it. And it goes, oh, I'll just install all these missing dependencies and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is nuts, right? And that was ages ago.
Right.
If you remember back then, it could churn out all this code, but it was fairly shit at it back then. Like you had to like really, really specify everything and be really careful about it. And then every time you requested a change, it might like lose half of the code to make it pass a test and all this kind of stuff. Right. Not to say that stuff never happens now, but like when I use those tools now, like Claude Code or whatever, it's like it in general designs pretty good things. I usually spend more time in the design than the coding. Like I talk to it for 2 or 3 days until I'm really happy with a design or something. But then it just like smashes through the code, and it produces something that like pretty much works and like is pretty decent kind of thing. And it is so much better than it was just a few years ago. Like
the maturity is coming at rapid paces.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, and Cursor not being that like necessarily advanced in the space and just getting picked up today for $60 billion as like a half-assed IDE. Not to put it down, but to say like Cursor being one of the solutions that's more like running behind and somehow still being snapped up at this point for that kind of valuation. It's just like the mania in the space is insane.
Yeah, it's all pretty mental, and like if a lot of the things that I only realized this recently as I was reflecting, that a lot of the things I would get extremely frustrated about with AI like 2 years ago or something, I'm like, that hasn't happened for quite a while, or you know what I mean? Like, so I can see why, various people are skeptical about certain capabilities of AI. But I'm like, have you tried that like in the last 3 months? Because it might be a different story now.
Do you expect AI to help more with the vulnerability research and discovery side, the exploitation side, or the overall security engineering side? When you extrapolate where we'll be in a year from now, 2 years from now, where do you personally think you'll get the best benefit of using it?
Like for different, I mean, obviously for different people, it can do. Like there's so many different models, and they're trained for different things, and you can exploit them for different capabilities. I think they're very good at both. I think at the moment there's a big, I guess the large focus is on vulnerability discovery, and that's a byproduct of the fact that that ultimately the security products that that the Frontier Labs are producing are ultimately aimed at defensive work, I suppose. And so I feel like that's where the current push is. But like, as they're not, I don't think they're not good at exploit development. And like I said, to my previous question, the way to get the best benefit in either of those spaces, I think, is when you can limit the problem and exploit the like basically to get the best out of the LLM by giving it less guesswork and more concrete paths to success. I think both of them are growing rapidly. I don't really want to say one is better, like more likely than the other exactly. I think it very much depends on what your goal is. Some people are doing research where they just want to submit to, say, Google VRP or something, and they don't care about exploitation. A lot of people are doing defensive stuff, or maybe they're wanting to develop patches, so they don't care about that. But of course, that's not to say that they can't do exploitation, because they've shown, at least in several instances, that they can do that pretty well as well,
I thought it was sort of interesting to your point about sort of like splitting the components and the activities that go into this. On the example that I was just talking about, right? Like I watched this thing do all the discovery, like sort of all the reversing, getting into the thing. And then, my interest was like, okay, well, it's a backdoor. How do we exploit this thing? Like, how do I take advantage of whatever? I watched it churn and get all the information that it needed and essentially start to spit out everything. And once I used the word, the letters POC, that's the only time I finally hit, like on one of the two models, hit a guardrail. Where it was just like, oh, no, I can't possibly. Like, I've already outputted half of the Python. I've already found everything I need to find. And then you kind of like trip on this thing. I'm like, it felt so artificial, right, to put this limiter at that point. But it was like, this is not beyond the capability of the model, right?
Yeah, it's, to me, that I'm not really in agreement with that. Part of the things with the local LLMs you've probably seen is people have done a significant amount of research into ablation and like the obliterating the models, so they remove the guardrails and stuff like that. Obviously, they're a little less powerful than the frontier models, but it is very much an artificial limiter that I'm not sure. It kind of reminds me of previous hysterias around like, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to reverse engineer and stuff like that, I could be misremembering this, but I also seem to remember when Metasploit first became a big thing that a number of people had something to say about that. It kind of reminds me of that level of hysteria, and I'm not sure that it's serving anything. And I guess I'm also maybe this is just because of my work, but it's not really comfortable to me that these random large companies are making arbitrary decisions about what is safe in security and what's not.
There's a lot of controversy in that right now, and it's a really odd. I mean, you say it's because of your work, but I don't know that it would be fair to dismiss it on that line. I think you're just in a position where, because in a sense you're assumed to be on the outs because you're doing vulnerability research, that you get to say, hey, this seems a little ridiculous. Anybody who's in the defensive space right now, full on, is so beholden to these companies, right? Like, to the idea that like you might get left out, not get involved in like the cyber whatever program. They might not, involve you in the access to this or that thing. That what you're getting is just no real discussion or criticism around how these guardrails are being proposed and whether they're being properly rolled out and if it's being given access to the right folks. And it's quite interesting because it's more about a sort of chilling effect than it is about a discussion of like, hey, this is a fucking tool, right? It's a tool. It's giving us a bit more of this. It's making some of these things a bit easier. It is or isn't doing some of these others. And quite interestingly, I was even like, I can't remember what I saw. I think probably just one of these tweets that end up being surprisingly insightful. It's like some performance metrics around the fact that like the guardrails are making the models worse. Like,
yeah,
performance wise, right?
The comment that you're talking about, I believe, was actually referring to the obliterated Gemma models, and they're like, hey, when you remove the guardrails, this actually performs better. I remember reading the comments about that as well. I didn't actually look at the source data of what they're basing that on exactly. So maybe take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, like, I mean, in any event, it seems, at least at the moment, a fair few of the frontier models, like you said, they'll kind of do most of it without really telling you can't. But
right.
They'll probably tighten that over time. I'm not sure.
Right. I think it's so. Let me ask you something. I mean, I'm not a vulnerability research expert by any stretch whatsoever. I know for a fact that we tend to mischaracterize the space routinely, right? Like, I hope us less so than other folks, but still, right? Like, it's not our space. The fear here around something like Mythos, but also just this idea of like, hey, point and click, get me an O-Day, is this idea that like you're essentially going to flood this space that is not easily patched, not easily fixed, not easily defended, but now very easily exploited. And presumably what that entails is, you've lowered the cost, you've commoditized the idea of getting an O-Day. So now we're going to see O-Days all the time for all these things. From the perspective of somebody who's, I mean, quite apex in the vulnerability research space, what do you see that? I was going to say, like, what does that leave for you? But really, I think, what does that even amount to? Like, if the notion is, hey, there's all these like easy O-Days falling out of the sky, is that really like end of the line for vulnerability research from where you're sitting? Or is it just kind of like, well, the kids are going to have these toys, but like over here in this top space, like we play in a totally different ball game?
Yeah, so it's a very complicated question because there's second order effects of these tools that are being produced. What they are doing, you're right, is somewhat democratizing the ability to find vulnerabilities. I've seen firsthand, people find vulnerabilities with AI that basically have no idea how the thing they're looking at even works. So it does happen. I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think the ability to do that successfully on the high-end targets is more limited than people are making out. Especially if you're just going, hey, find me a bug in this, and it pops one out. I don't really think they're quite that good. I haven't used Mythos. It's probably better at it than the current things. But I do feel, at least for now and for the near term, that people who have a very in-depth technical knowledge of certain platforms or code bases have an advantage with AI acting more as a force multiplier for them than they would for someone else. And the reason is because, firstly, they have already a good intuition of exactly where to look and exactly the right questions to ask the LLM that are a lot more specific than perhaps generalized questions. Secondly, if you have an LLM evaluate and hypothesize about vulnerabilities in a particular code base, if you've spent any time doing this, all of it sounds pretty good. Like, it all sounds pretty plausible. And an experienced person can go, well, I know that's not a thing. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. Like, let's spend our time on this. And so I think they have the ability to more effectively perhaps utilize LLM's capabilities to find vulnerabilities in some of these high-end targets. Now, that's not to say that LLMs can't at all find vulnerabilities in these targets without an experienced operator. Like, clearly they can and have on several occasions. And the expectation is that they will get better at that. This will certainly change the economics of the vulnerability marketplace. Vulnerabilities, I would imagine, themselves become less valuable in and of themselves. Provable and exploitable ones will retain a high value, but they might lose value or undergo some kind of product change based on the fact that, like, the expectation of them lasting for any length of time will probably drop. You're talking about people popping out 0-day and I guess exploits as well. But the vendors have access to the same technology and, in general, dramatically more compute, not to mention potentially exclusive access to things like Mythos. They have the ability to find the vulnerabilities that other people are finding at scale, and they have the ability to improve the throughput of their patching or whatever. And so,
but
strongly accelerates. It strongly accelerates both sides, I think.
I obviously agree with that, but this is where I'm genuinely curious, like, in the wild, and like, without having to cite any specifics, but to what extent is patching genuinely something that, like, is getting in your way, and in what particular sort of lanes, right? And I say that just being a little facetious and a little cheeky, but mostly because we're so used to dealing with a bunch of vendors who, like, they're fucking drowning in vulnerabilities, and we're lucky if we're talking about end days because they have actually pushed a patch. But many of them, it's like, well, yeah, there's been a vuln in there. These guys haven't released a patch in like 6 weeks. right? We don't know what to like, whether to even expect them to fix a fucking thing. So I think that's part of the fear here is just like this notion of, we just don't see these vendors moving so quickly or even having adequate patching mechanisms. So what you see is the O days keep racking up and the patches don't seem to actually materialize or diffuse. But that's easy for us to say from our vantage point. I'm curious to what extent it genuinely ends up tripping you guys all that often, and if it's in specific lanes, right?
Yeah, one of the fears that you're talking about is kind of interesting. I was just thinking as you were saying, is the less sophisticated the vendor, and my perception is colored by dealing with the most sophisticated vendors in general. But the less sophisticated the vendor, I guess the more likely you are to be able to pop out a 0-day with an LLM. And they're also the people less likely to, I guess, patch it in a a short space of time or whatever.
Right.
So those particular vendors could potentially find themselves in a not very comfortable position, depending on how much access they get to LLMs and like what their pipeline is and so forth. The more sophisticated vendors, I think, are in a much better position to deal with this. And don't forget that as the cost of development goes towards zero, it's not that difficult for them to re-architect significant blocks of not just the vulnerable code, but like their infrastructure, their patching infrastructure or whatever. They can change things significantly that were before were like, oh, this is going to be like a 2-year effort or something. So I think vendors will respond not just by patching bugs more quickly. I think that's probably the less interesting thing they'll do. They'll probably implement other things in their, in their infrastructure that facilitates faster rollout or detection or, whatever. And they have the ability to iterate like rather quickly on that, whereas before perhaps they didn't as much. But yeah, like obviously, I guess if anyone could just pop out an exploit in things, even things that are less than, I would say, the premier vendors, that could cause pockets of catastrophe. And
for you guys or for the others?
For everyone,
right?
Right. But like, it's just it's so hard to predict, and I don't know if you probably haven't noticed, but like I've been really quite quiet about AI stuff on social media because I'm like
deliberately so.
Sorry.
Deliberately so? You're staying quiet?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, because firstly, I wanted to get a better grasp of the technology before I started running my mouth about it. But second, as you can see now, I've just been like, oh, well, fuck that. But but secondly, it changed. Like I said, it changes every few weeks. For me, I find it exhausting sometimes and even comical because I feel like someone will come on like Twitter or something and be like, holy shit, have you guys seen this? This is the best thing that's ever happened. Like this thing is crazy. It's going to revolutionize everything. You've got to download this right now, blah, blah, blah. And then 3 weeks later, they're like, fuck that shit. It was terrible. Why do you even bother with that?
This is the one.
This is the best thing. This is going to change our life. And it's funny because it's the exact same people. So I find it a little bit funny. But yeah, like it's so hard to predict the second order of effects for offense and defense, I guess internet security in general. I will confess that when I first got into hacking and the internet and stuff, one of the things I thought was awesome about it was that it was a I regarded it as a frontier, like a Wild West, where stuff just happened, and I kind of like the chaos to an extent.
Well, we're in this like manifest destiny period once again, right? Like it's the Wild West has
Yeah,
returned, right?
that's right. And to be fair, like back then, the stakes were pretty low because it was just a bunch of crap websites at the time, basically. But and now there's like, you know, obviously real security concerns, particularly with people's personal devices and stuff. So it's more serious now. But like, yeah, it's just the AI thing is one of the things that I find completely mental about it is we've sort of known AI is coming eventually. And for basically my entire career, everyone's like, oh, every now and then on a podcast or something, people would be talking about like, what about the ethics of AI? What if it could do this and that? And they'd have this long drawn out discussion, forget about it, have another one in 6 months or something. And then one day, like OpenAI and Anthropic and a few people are like, hey, you can do this now. Let's see what happens. Like,
Right.
like all of those discussions were just like tabled to,
Right.
they're like, well, we'll just do it and then see what happens. Like, yeah,
Leave your hot takes behind, right?
yeah.
Well, just staying on the AI thing very quickly, Mark, you mentioned the disruptions on the economics of it. And I'm curious for your thoughts on how AI disrupts pricing models around these exploit purchasing programs. You know, we see things like full chain exploits, $2.5 million. Can you dig a little bit into like when we see as an outsider, a company advertising to buy a full chain for up to XYZ million dollars. Like, how does that, what does that really mean in your world, one? And two, how do you imagine it, AI disrupting it in ways? Do you think prices get lower, prices get higher? You're able to help me understand how you're thinking about the economics of it.
Yeah, I can talk. I've sort of talked about this in a few talks before, because AI isn't the only factor that's impacting this, although it is certainly a factor now. But like essentially, if you're talking about like chains and stuff like that, you know, you're basically people advertising a capability for a device, and those chains will historically have generally been priced based on a number of you know, aspects of that chain. So what devices does it affect? What doesn't it affect? How reliable is it? What is the attack vector? Is it browser? Is it zero click? Is it Wi-Fi, baseband? You know, what level of access does it have?
What do you mean by level of access? Can you go a little deeper? Go a little deeper for the audience, because there's like a lot of nuance there that people don't quite understand.
Sure. So early in vulnerability, like a lot earlier in the vulnerability market, basically, as you know, there was no real protections. You got code execution, that was the end of it. And then there was sandboxes. So you needed two bugs. You needed like a remote bug, maybe a web bug or something, and then like a kernel privilege escalation or something. And that would give you full access to the computer and later phones. And then over time, increasingly, they've added more and more mitigations. So you had to get out of this mitigation and then that one and then that one. And so over time, what has happened is these chains have gotten longer and frankly more brittle, and they give you less access to the phone or the computer than the previous simpler ones did, and they cost more. So I did a presentation back in 2019 or something at B-Sides Canberra, actually, that was called "What's in a Jailbreak," and it talked about this, and it was like, yeah, you know, a jailbreak used to be 2 or 3 components. It would get you full access to the phone, and then as time goes on, you had to have often more than that. You had to have 4 or 5 components, and it didn't really get you full access to the phone anymore because they did things like introduce a SEP, and you're like, well, we've got full access to the application operating system, but not really the secrets that are in the SEP. And then we'd be like, oh, actually, they've got KTRR and various mitigations where you're like, oh, well, now you can get kernel read write. You can't really get kernel code execution, so you sort of have access to most of the phone. And like over time, like that gets
It's just
less
gotten
and less.
harder and harder. Yeah.
And so these chains have gotten more and more expensive because they're more complicated to produce and maintain and so forth. But there's an inflection point where it starts getting complicated. One is you're like, okay, a lot of people can't afford this. Like this is going to cost a fortune going forward. So it's going to take us a year to produce or something, and only a few people can afford it. And so you might be pushed towards a certain type of customer, or you might go, you know what, we're just going to go full out for volume. So, for example, the company Grayshift, which you might know, their technology when they first produced it was a very complicated multi-stage thing that was trying to do something very difficult, which was more or less unlock a phone, which became pretty difficult once a SEP became a thing. You could, if you made a chain like this at the time, you probably could have sold it for a lot of money, but they went the opposite direction. They're like, we're going to sell it to a lower tier of people, like a lower technically capable tier of customer, and it's going to be like a button, and and it'll actually be quite cheap. So basically, try and go for tons of customers instead of a few customers paying top dollar. And so the economics change as things get more difficult. You can sort of do one or two of these models, but like as AI has come in and various other factors impacting the market, you start to see like, hey, these components aren't really lasting for very long. They're getting patched or perhaps mitigated or so forth. We've got a limited amount of money. We don't really want to keep buying one of these every month. So maybe you have to change your business model a little bit, and start worrying more about like, the consumers of these products don't actually, from a certain standpoint, they don't actually care about exploits, and they also don't care about the complexity of them. They're trying to achieve an effect, and that's all they care about. If a shell script did it, they would be like, great, we'll pay for it. Like, they start looking at like, how do we achieve what we need to achieve for our job? Can we live with less? Do we need a full chain? How? And that looks different for everyone. If you're a technically sophisticated customer, maybe you can buy components and put them together and stuff. Some customers don't have that capability, so they're like, well, we just have to get something that works. And this was, a market that companies such as NSO targeted among other people, because they more or less make a point and click thing and go, don't worry about it. We'll worry about all the exploity stuff in the background. You don't have to do anything. So it's very like how you position your products and how they're impacted by AI as well as mitigations and other market forces is, producing some of these things is very expensive, but sometimes you need to rethink how viable it is to continue to want full access to a device rather than partial access, and what is the minimum requirement for actually achieving an effect that you want to happen. As things get more difficult and more expensive, you might be more willing to consider different options that are more cost effective, or if you are still demanding full access to a phone, modifying your business model such that it's a more predictable expenditure on your part. I guess.
Let me
Mark,
ask a quick question right
can I
before
ask
you go.
a
Yes,
very
go.
quick follow-up? Considering what you're saying and the things are getting more difficult in getting full access, how relevant is persistence these days? I was at a conference a couple of years ago talking to a bunch of exploit developers, and they were saying we just don't care about persistence anymore. It's on the contrary, it's like harmful to even think or deploy persistence. And like from your point of view, how effective is the advice to reboot your phone daily? Like if there's no persistence, rebooting phone daily, does it work? Is it like useful at all? And do you reboot your phone daily?
Right. So, like persistence is like obviously it's a very useful capability for a customer to have in their arsenal, but whether they deploy it or not would depend, I guess, on various factors. One is how concerned are they about getting caught? Like what are the artifacts that this persistence leaves behind? And that is a real concern. The complexity of actually finding a useful persistence bug and using it is also, obviously a fairly large investment in effort. And most people, I would say, are like, it's not really critical in a lot of cases to have persistence anyway. And as things get more difficult, you spend more and more of your, I guess, vulnerability research and engineering effort anyway on maintaining the critical portions of the chain. So if you come up with a persistence bug, it's for sure valuable, but it is not a critical component. And like you said, there might be situations where they're like, we don't feel comfortable laying this down because it's too dangerous or something. But definitely it's a valuable thing. And I would say less people are concerned about it because, like I said, the economics of it is such that you're more worried about your critical path, I suppose.
How much of a deterrent
Does rebooting work, and do you reboot?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, like, obviously rebooting will have the byproduct of getting rid of things that are just memory resident. And so if they don't have a persistent solution, they'll have to recompromise your phone. So that can certainly be an effective thing to do. Obviously depending on the arsenal that they have available and how difficult it is to reinfect your phone is another question. But yeah, like, I mean, rebooting your phone will get rid of whatever's resident. So, I mean, it's not a bad
There's no
thing.
harm.
Yeah.
I mean, how good is your zero click, right? Like, oh, they reboot it, and you just like, boom, it just it's reinfected. Let's move on.
In the triangulation case, phones were getting reinfected every like 2-3 days. Phones would get hit again, over and over and over and over again. So you reboot, they hit it again, like 2-3 days, hit it again. Which creates a lot of opportunities for artifacts, for capturing network traffic, for doing man in the middle, catching the full exploit chain, and things like that.
Mark, how much of it?
Exactly. Like, obviously, every deployment is a risk. And like I said, I mean, it doesn't hurt to reboot your phone. So
Yeah. How much of a deterrent has lockdown mode been?
A deterrent in the sense of
as a roadblock to your work, right? Do you did it how much did it raise the bar and impose cost on you?
It certainly raises the bar in different scenarios. I'm not really sure how much I want to talk about.
Okay, fair enough.
No
Fair
worries,
enough.
no
If you
worries, don't talk.
no, I don't want to put you into a place where you don't want to talk about stuff.
Sucks to live in lockdown mode, but maybe there is a point to some of this. Right?
Doesn't suck.
But let me
It's
ask the question
okay.
this way: when Apple says None of these things have exploited lockdown mode. If you had lockdown mode turned on, none of these things would have been exploited. I mean, how do you respond to that? Is it really a deterrent?
Well, I mean, it definitely lowers the attack surface significantly, but also claims like this are sort of silly in a way, because there's no doubt that it lowers the attack surface and makes it more difficult. But like, the reason I say the claim is a bit silly is because if you look at something caught in the wild, and you're like, hey, you know, if they were doing this, then, you know, it wouldn't have worked. What you're leaving out of that is you're like, another way of looking at it is they deployed exactly what they needed to against that target to succeed, and they did succeed. If they didn't have a lockdown solution, they wouldn't have deployed it. Or if they did have a lockdown solution and they didn't deploy it, it's because they knew he wasn't running it. Like, you can't look at something after the fact and go on, oh, well, if we'd done this thing, then this wouldn't have worked. And I'm like, yeah, but then they wouldn't have deployed it. They would have deployed something else. So it's a bit it's a bit disingenuous to make that claim, in my opinion. And also, I'm pretty sure I saw that they said, and I could be misremembering this, so apologies if it's true, but I'm pretty sure I remember someone saying something along the lines of like, no iPhone has ever been compromised with lockdown mode on. And I'm like, well, no one who's successfully done that is going to come out and go, well, excuse me, I actually did it to this one over here.
Until today.
Yeah.
Tell him, Mark. Tell him.
Yeah.
Have you gotten a chance to look at MIE, this Apple Memory Integrity Enforcement, and is that a game changer? Is that expected to be a game changer?
Yeah, so obviously this is a really large security feature that Apple added. I can't even remember. I've lost all sense of time since AI started.
Since
like,
COVID started, it feels like years become months, and it's just like a blur. But yeah, I think MIE was last year.
Was it last year?
A19, in the A19 chip.
Yeah, so
iPhone 17.
Yeah, like every time mitigation or series of mitigations like this comes out, it offers like a fairly strong security guarantees about, like in this case, protection against a lot of traditional style vulnerabilities, UAFs, buffer overflows, etc., to some degree. And so, you know, every time a mitigation comes out like this, it can effectively render a significant amount of vulnerabilities non-exploitable. And so that's always a game changer for sure. It definitely makes things more difficult. And like the introduction of pack and later data pack, you know, they're always adding to it a little bit. So it's sort of a moving target as well. Yeah, it's definitely makes things more difficult, and you know, will have the effect of essentially having less available vulnerabilities, you know, that are actually going to effectively work on those platforms.
Maybe I'm just jaded and old, but every time one of these big mitigations come, I remember going back to the sandbox, right? It is held up as like the standard, and then the bypasses come, and then we end up back at square one where we're working on new mitigations. Is that just a natural loop of things? Are you expecting memory integrity enforcement bypasses to be kind of a normal thing a year from now, 2 years from now?
So first of all, I don't think we do end up back at square one. As we were talking about before with, for example, platform chains, each of those things, like, you have to bypass in some form or another.
But it hasn't stopped anyone. The numbers are just climbing.
Has it not? Like I said, a lot of the chains that come out get less access than they did previously. Over time, that is true. Like I said, previously full access to the phone, then not SEP but kernel code execution, then actually not kernel code execution, and then like with the introduction of later on PPL and then SPTM, it's like even with kernel read and write, you can't actually write into other processes and critical data structures and stuff like that. So each of those things, and every now and then you bypass these things. You either have to have a chain that is constantly bypassing all these things, which is quite brittle because, as you can imagine, those mitigations continually get improved as attacks come out. Or you go, okay, this chain is just going to do less. So I would suggest that it's not that you get back to square one. And when someone finds a way to bypass something, it's not the end of that mitigation. They just change the mitigation. Most mitigations are deployed, I would say, somewhat conservatively because they run the risk of destroying the user experience if they start unexpectedly killing processes and whatever they're doing, right? So a lot of the time, in my experience, a new mitigation will come out. And this is not just Apple, this is everyone, like Android, etc., Windows. They'll just be like, they'll deploy it, but relatively conservatively, like turned down fairly low. And a bunch of people will come out and go, man, it's so easy to bypass this. And a few of them will be bugs in the actual implementation. And a lot of them will be like, oh, yeah, it's just like not enabled or something. And over time, this gets more and more improvement. And then, like, after a while, the noise about how you can just bypass that mitigation starts dying down a lot. So
is it like a soak period? Like you're basically just rolling it out low and slow, and then you see it increase?
Yeah, well, that is my experience. And like I said, my belief is that most companies deploy them relatively conservatively because a lot of security features can really destroy the user experience if they misfire, Right. So I think, maybe they're killing processes, maybe they slow down the device too much, etc. So they usually, I think, deploy them relatively conservatively, see how they survive contact with the internet, and then go, okay, maybe we can turn this up a little bit. And that is generally I would say the growth of various mitigations. So I wouldn't say we're back to square one. It's obviously a cat and mouse game with trying to get around these things. Like those things that produce serious roadblocks will command higher prices. But like I said, there's some point in time, and that inflection point is different for different customers that have different missions, where they're like, do I actually need to bypass this or not? What am I doing? Like, we can do a bunch of our stuff without this. So,
Yeah, I'm surprised that we're not hearing, and this is something I think I speculated on like months back, but particularly when you talk about your NSOs and like folks that are more like, hey, just pay me, point and click. I'm going to give you, I'll take care of it, right? I'll take care of sort of the complex, but I've been curious to why or whether you see more of this moving into, let's stop trying to pop these hardened mobile devices, and instead, like, if the effect that you wanted was to get location and emails and messages and blah blah, and these are all sitting on the fucking cloud in a backup somewhere, right? Like, why am I bothering with the endpoint at all, right? Like, is that a viable offering, or is it
yeah, right.
outlandish
So,
in some way, right?
Right. So you're not wrong. Like basically, we as a company focus on our specialization, but obviously the people that are actually on the front lines and uh, consumers of these tools have a larger arsenal than just us. So they're probably considering all their options, including human intervention, whatever. Um, I don't really have visibility into their whole array of what they have available, but like, um,
But you see it only as like a
obviously,
downstream, like the custom, right? Like, and I wasn't trying to talk you into talking about the customers as much as like when I look, I can see how in Five Eyes countries this is maybe just not a viable thing. But if you're telling me I'm an exploit broker or more importantly a PSOA style provider in, I don't know, Israel, Russia, China, right? To what to what extent am I just gonna roll into, hey, let me give you the effect that you were looking for by just, I'm gonna go grab this stuff wherever, right? I'm at the
yeah,
telco,
yeah,
I'm at the cloud, right?
yeah, absolutely. If you, I can't remember the details now, but I remember one of the early articles about NSO, and they had like a constellation of sister companies, if I recall correctly, that were doing SS7. And they're doing like all sorts of stuff. And so yeah, like there's a lot of commercial entities that are like you said, there's a market for producing an effect, and the way that they produce that might be very different than going for just endpoint exploitation. And there's numerous, I think, vendors that a lot of them have these niche little, I guess, areas that they focus on in the same way that we do. Yeah, some of those might be viable or more viable alternatives a lot of the time than the kind of stuff we look at typically.
I'm waiting to see if the guys want to jump in because I just want, at this point I just wanted to be like, hey, you actually mentioned Android, which I was surprised, right? Because I think for all of this, any mitigation we talk about, it's like, well, iOS and Apple actually investing into this, and me as like a snobbish person that looks down on like the green text message people, right? You go, well, I don't know about the Android folk, right? Apart from Coastin, I'm assuming everybody on that side is just like getting fucked much more like easily and regularly. But is that a fair characterization, or is that actually a platform that you've seen kind of keep on par?
So it depends on what your threat model is. And so in the past, one of the things that I used to say was most people's threat model is they lose their phone and someone looks at their photos or something. And Apple is pretty great for that, like the SEP and all that kind of stuff. Um, Android, it's hard to collectively just refer to them as like this is their threat model and it's good or bad, because obviously each vendor is a little bit different and they're increasingly diverging. For example, obviously, you guys would have seen. So Harmony has Huawei increasingly gone their own way with their HarmonyOS Next platform, which and increasingly like nationalizing that as a platform kind of thing. They've invested quite a lot of money into various aspects of their security posture. They did a lot of it before they diverged from Android exactly, but like increasingly, that is its own thing that is becoming increasingly distinct from Android. But even before it was, they invested quite a lot into their security and went from a joke of a vendor to being really quite good in many respects. Pixel has a significantly different security posture than a Samsung, for example, and so I mean characterizing them all together is a little bit difficult, but
Right.
like various ones have had their strengths and weaknesses in the past. But yeah, like obviously, Apple tends to have cutting edge security that I would say in general is better than a lot of the Android vendors, than all of the Android vendors probably. But yeah, like in particular, like I said, the direction that Huawei is going is kind of interesting.
But Apple owns the update mechanism, right? That gives them that advantage as well. The other thing on Android is like if you're an end user, you're waiting for your carrier to ship the update. There's a big giant an extra window of opportunity there as well, right?
Yeah, Apple have obviously a monopoly on their entire device stack. I don't actually know about this, but like I imagine if Huawei don't now, they will soon, at least in Asia. So like, you know, yeah, it is a great advantage to own the entire device stack, like the entire technology stack rather. And they have a strong ability to be quite responsive that some other vendors don't have.
I'm glad you mentioned the HarmonyOS thing. Well, I'm in Singapore right now, and so of course, like my just out of the temptation that comes with like seeing these duty-free stores on the way out of Singapore. It's like the last time I was there with Costa, and I picked up like an Oppo Find N5, and it was like the most beautiful fucking piece of hardware that I never used, because what the fuck was I gonna do with this like beautiful device that, you know, I needed a baseband exploit just to try to figure out what the fuck was in this, you know, just in the software image. And as you might know, in my household, these aren't just like littered around, right? This is pre-Mythos. I couldn't just call someone up at Anthropic and ask for one, right? But it was really fascinating for the little piece of it that I was like tinkering around and trying to figure this out, right? Like they have a version of their OS that's specific for the Chinese market. Then you've got like a version of the OS that's like different features still blocked, but is kind of like a global image. And there's this giant, like, I mean, they're making it beautiful. It looks really Apple-esque, right? Like you have this whole experience going, but there's also this complete obscurity, at least in my experience, as to like what's actually happening within that ecosystem that I'm like genuinely fascinated by, much more so than iOS for some fucking reason.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. So one of the things that I've sort of mentioned in a talk or two before, I think, and this was some years ago, was that, and I think it's more true now than it was then, is because of current events and things that are going on around the world is becoming increasingly insular, and the fallout of that, I think, is that there's an increasing amount of balkanization of the internet, from being a free and open internet where everyone basically has the same experience, to providers and services that fall on geopolitical lines. And so, you know, experiencing the internet in China would be very different than here, for example. Not just because of the Great Firewall thing, but increasingly they're like, hey, why are we relying on the US for our technology stack? That doesn't seem like a great idea. Let's just make our own. And so they can, and they are, right? This balkanization is not just, and then of course, you know, various countries also have their own version of things. Again, China has like the whole WeChat thing going on. Russia has their own services that we don't use, like their own Facebook replacements and stuff like that. And then geopolitics aside, there's also commercial entities that are increasingly, the internet is increasingly over time become sort of like 5 websites or something like that, right? And at the time when I was saying this, I'm like, it's like Facebook and Google and Apple's ecosystem and stuff. Although now maybe it's OpenAI and Anthropic and whatever the hell they're doing, right? Increasingly, this data is concentrated into a few places that and a few technology stacks that are isolated and a treasure trove as well, if you can attack them, I suppose. And so, in terms of like security of devices and stuff, it becomes increasingly, firstly, important for national security, but also a blurred picture in my mind. As you pointed out, you can get a device over there that basically has a kind of different operating system than if you get the same device over here. And things like that, like blur the picture of like what their security posture actually looks like, and what your exposure to your personal data, etc., actually is.
I think the assumption has been largely that the software stack and the security stack was going to be garbage, right? Like, okay, like good luck, right? You're like departing from this tried and true vetted sort of stack, and you're going to come up with your own. And I suspect for a while it was garbage. I think what's interesting is to start to hear, hey, at least coming from like the Huawei China side of things, you're like, this is no longer like, it sounds like we're no longer talking about some like Bush League stack that's just like, Samsung putting this, half-assed thing together, and you're like, yep, it's Swiss cheese. Half of it is like bloatware, right? Like you don't even need a proper exploit because the software they loaded it up with is already such a fucking, maze of just vulns. At what point, or like how far are we from seeing novel mitigations on the Chinese side, is I guess a question I hadn't considered before, but I'm curious if you have an opinion on it.
Well, they started working on things that were novel, like some of them, a lot of the ideas were not necessarily new, but I mean, going a microkernel instead of just going, oh, we'll just do Linux again, is quite a move. And I think, like you said, when anything first comes out, you're right, it probably wasn't great. But like, as time goes on, I mean, they're not dumb, and they've got quite a lot of money, and they're heavily incentivized to make it really secure. Not just them, but anyone that has a platform that's de facto a national asset. So in the US, that might include Google or OpenAI or something. Is obviously going to be a prime target for political adversaries. And so there's a fairly heavy incentive, I think, to want to secure that. And you're like probably prepared to invest quite a bit of money in that, especially if it's more or less a government sponsored technology.
Costin, you're quiet, my friend.
No, not at all.
We're all thrown off by the time zone change, I think.
No,
it is 1:42 a.m.
I'm
here.
thinking, should I ask the politically incorrect questions, or should I not? Like things like that.
Don't get canceled.
I'll ask one. Mark, have you seen these stories, like recently published stories about Corona, Dark Sword, about the proliferation of exploit kits being resold, leaked, and so on? What do you think? Is this like a new phenomenon, or is this something to worry about? Or are these like kind of singular cases? Is this something that you worry about, burning the midnight oil over? Do you lose sleep over the fact that some of the exploits that you guys develop could get leaked? or is it like something that it's a customer's responsibility the moment it's out of your hands? Is not your problem anymore? How do you approach all these issues, like ethical issues?
Yeah, so like I think obviously when um, valuable capabilities get leaked to adversaries
It's a
and so
disaster, huh?
forth, yeah, it can be very damaging. And so, like, obviously, there's a big um, a big drive to not let that happen if possible. For us, we don't just hand it over to our customers and then go, oh well, who cares what happens now? Apart from it obviously being uh, not good for us in that everything gets patched and burned. What what I would say is that we try and be quite selective about who our customers are, and that's not just saying the ethics framework under which they operate, but also the OpSec under which they operate. Now, of course, you might think, well, how would you know? Basically, firstly, we've got a fairly long and enduring relationship with a number of our customers, and those relationships were formed back at the beginning of my last company, in where we were working very closely with a sister company where basically all of their employees, or most of them, came from a few of these agencies and had very recently at the time been working on the front lines with them, knew exactly how their operations work, so forth and so forth. So as we grew as a company, even within the Five Eyes, we didn't just go, hey, if you're in the Five Eyes, you're in, we'll give it to you. We had to be convinced that their OpSec and the framework under which they operated was something that we could agree with. And so the way we did that is we basically, for most of the existence of my previous company prior to acquisition, we didn't do any real sales. Like we didn't, very rarely got introduced to new customers, and we only took word of mouth introductions from our existing customers that we trusted. So if we had the opportunity to deal with a new customer, we'd go up to our previous ones and go, what do you think about what these guys are doing? Do you think this is someone that we could work with or not? And so for us, like keeping a fairly tight leash on our capabilities to try and preserve them is part of what we try and deliver as a company. But apart from that, we're also concerned about, as I mentioned previously, our own OpSec, like us getting compromised, or always the prospect of the internal threats and so forth. So we constantly try and reevaluate our position about and also get insight from customers about the technologies that we're rolling out, and the various policies that we have, and whether they think that those satisfy the requirements that reflect the sensitivity, I guess, of the tools that we are creating.
Have you ever had to deal with a scare?
With a what?
A scare, like a scare that one of these things got leaked, someone misused it, something. And did you ever have, without getting into details, is that like a real thing to deal with?
It's a constant fear, and like I can't recall offhand of a thing that was just like, hey, this is happening right now. But there's been incidents before where we've been concerned about an incident that either happened or that we thought might have happened, and and yeah, like depending on the nature of it, yeah, we'll basically tend to go into a full lockdown and be like, okay, we need to step back from this. Did this happen? Do we need to reevaluate our policies to make sure this can't happen? And you know, our policy is generally that if we ever conclusively learn that something has happened or potentially happened, we will tell all our customers straight away. Like, we give them a report of, we think this happened. This is what may or may not be affected, and that allows them to make informed decisions about, if they think a capability could be compromised or so forth.
How good is GrapheneOS security-wise, in your opinion? I mean, the GrapheneOS was just featured in an article, trash article on Wired, like a very bad article, in my opinion. And we know there's also a lot of push, that trying to convince people that criminals use GrapheneOS, drug dealers use GrapheneOS, while in my experience, they use cheap Chinese phones with WhatsApp instead of GrapheneOS with something like Session or Signal. So, like, security wise, is like any interest into getting chains for GrapheneOS or for Vanadium, the browser from GrapheneOS, or nobody really cares about GrapheneOS and it's all Huawei phones, Honor and the likes?
Well, like, it very much depends on the. I mean, GrapheneOS has a lot of like pretty great security features. It very much depends on when you're talking about the appetite for vulnerabilities in particular platforms. It very much depends on the charter of the agency buying it. If you have an agency that's targeting a bunch of people that they know are running GrapheneOS, then they're going to be like, yeah, like, we'll take anything we can get. And there's probably not that much around for it, because most people are more interested in the mobile space on targeting something with a higher target market, like iPhones,
Huawei.
or regular, or Huawei, or regular Androids or whatever. But definitely, and it's not just graphene. It's like there's a lot of niche products that there'll be like some like class of customers are like, hey, we really need this thing, and often they end up getting sort of niche research shops that either for some reason specialize in things that no one else is specializing in, but has a small target market, but perhaps that little outfit can totally satisfy that requirement. Or maybe they'll get people on contract to help out with research initiatives and so forth. So yeah, like, absolutely, I'm sure there's people that would be interested in it, but due to the the economics of it for most mobile vendors, they probably don't spend a huge amount of time on it.
And where is, in your opinion, where is Samsung, like, across the spectrum? Is like between Apple, Huawei, GrapheneOS? How do you see the evolution of Samsung? And I'm asking because several years ago we came by some interesting tool sets that were targeting mobile basebands, and they had like a very limited number of vendors. So I assume it's like very highly vendor specific when it comes to baseband targeting. So. And by the way, that could be another question for you. Like, is there any interest in, and is there like any future? What do you think about targeting through mobile baseband attacks? And what do you think about what Samsung is doing with Knox and the other things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Samsung's evolution, obviously they were pretty bad for a while, and over time they've added a number of pretty good security features, Knox, like you mentioned, RKP, I think, a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, like I mean, I think they're pretty good. Like obviously, I think Apple is quite
The best.
above them. Yeah, um, but um, but I mean, their security, like most other vendors, has um, improved fairly fairly consistently over the years. In terms of baseband type attack vectors and stuff, I mean, sure, yeah. Like, why wouldn't people? As long as people have exploits for, like, maybe you should maybe you should put a few baseband images into Mythos and
Hmm.
pop out a couple of exploit chains.
How much do those baseband exploits require, like proximity access? Can they be done, I don't know, remotely across the world? Me from Romania to someone in Brazil, or do they all of them require some kind of proximity to the target?
Most of the time, I would say they require proximity. Some sophisticated customers might have other options, like maybe they can hack the telcos in that
Right.
company or something like that. But that would be probably fairly highly scenario specific. Um, yeah, I don't really know a lot about it, to be honest.
Got it. And there was one more question that I wanted to ask you, because I think you mentioned this in a previous interview that there's a lot of interest from your side into things like all these CPU bugs, like row hammer and the variety of follow-ups. And every single mitigation or patch for those, be it microcode or whatever, it has some kind of an impact, like 5% CPU impact, 10% system slowdown, and sometimes people just don't care, like who's going to use those, is it really worth to enable these mitigations on a server CPU, or just completely forget about them? So yeah, the question was more along the lines, does anybody care about these CPU bugs? Are they like really useful during operations? And do you guys research any of these CPU related memory bugs?
We research uh, hardware related, like we do hardware related vulnerability research from time to time, but like uh, in terms of like whether you would use that in operations, like maybe people do, but I don't think it would be very common. Um, Personally speaking, if it was me, I imagine that they'd be pretty awesome for cloud-based attacking people.
Uh, okay.
But I have no knowledge about whether people actually deploy them in the wild or not. Like, it, if it were me, it would be definitely something I'd look into. You know.
How do you compare like security of mobile operating systems to, let's say, something like Windows? Do you think that Windows is like falling behind in terms of security? I mean, with mobiles, it feels like it's totally new world. Like Apple is creating, their own CPUs. Their CPUs have features that nobody else has. Like Windows has to run everywhere. Is it like much easier to develop exploit chain nowadays for Windows than it is for mobiles?
So I don't think Windows is really falling behind in terms of security. For a long time they've had pretty aggressive security and consistent like security mitigations and stuff like that. Like the Hyper-V stuff. Like they've done heaps and heaps of security work. I will say, in general, I've witnessed a decline of interest in Windows-based less than there was.
Oop.
Uh,
Oh,
am I still
Keep
here?
going, keep
Yeah,
going,
yeah,
keep
no,
going.
you're
there
still
you
here.
go. Go for it.
Yeah. So, but that's not really a commentary on security. It's more of a commentary on market share.
Yeah, people use mobiles like everywhere. They take it with them everywhere. Like they open Windows only every now and then.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to wrap up in a little bit. I don't want to take too much of your time. Costin, you had an additional question. No, that's
No.
it. Mark, do you guys report bugs to vendors? And if you do or you don't, can you help me understand the equity that goes into, you know what, this might just be big enough that I have to give to a vendor versus hoarding an ODay for use? Like, help me with your thinking there.
No.
I was looking at you. I'm like, why the fuck would he do that?
I mean, I think we've entered like pwn to own once or twice in the past. So, I mean, we've reported in those cases, but in general, no.
Maybe one final
Fuck 'em.
question for me. What's the return on investment on something like an iOS 0-day? Like comparing the amount of resources, the cost for you versus the amount that you sell it for. So what's like the return on investment?
This question's too complicated to answer because, like, there's a number of things like sometimes it might take a lot of work to do an iOS thing, but then maybe the next one is similar and it takes no time, kind of thing. Also, we don't really work like that. We don't really just make something and then sell it. We don't have a direct. The way our income is structured is not like that. It's not a one-to-one mapping.
Mark, do you have a thought on how your industry affects the conversation around lawful access, encryption backdoors? Do you believe that the availability of exploits to these customers kind of save the rest of us from having an encryption backdoor for law enforcement access? Do you think that you stand in the middle there?
I mean, to some degree, I think that's true. Like, I think while government departments can access devices in another way, a lot of them won't really push that hard for the thing that you're talking about. And so it has probably relaxed their position to some extent. But having said that, encryption backdoors or whatever, backdoors in your devices does not really solve the problem of a lot of the customers are trying to solve.
Right, that about covers it from me. Juanito, any last questions from you?
Actually, so I was joking when we had like a bit of a mic drop here, and I was joking that I'm like, hey, quit grilling Mark, but in reality, I think the what I would love is to kind of open the floor just for a second and be like, dude, I mean, we spend all our time on the threat intel space speculating about the vulnerability research side and saying like they're doing this well, they're doing this poorly, they're doing this on the, this is what the ROI looks like, this is what the economics look like. Can we invert that for a second and be like, I don't know how much attention you pay to the threat intel space or what we say about what's going on the vuln research side, but like, what are we getting like dead wrong? Like, do you see us just like fucking up hard in some blind spot that we're just completely unaware of or being lazy? Like, I'd love to know, because like we don't really get much feedback from anybody that knows what they're talking about. So if you help us grow here, right?
So this is why I ended up doing like a few talks on this previously, and the SCW and Risky Business podcast. I talked a little bit about this. The reason is I wanted to sort of just address at the time what I thought were misconceptions that were just bandied around a lot as if they were facts, and everyone in our space is like, that's not how that works at all, but no one says anything. And I'm like, I mean, I don't think it's that classified to go, hey, governments aren't actually stockpiling 20 Chrome bugs or whatever. I went and said a couple of things to that effect. I don't know if people still hold the same misconceptions. I feel like the attitude towards the industry that I'm in has shifted over time to grudging acceptance rather than outward hostility. So I'm not really sure what people say now, since since the time that I've done those previously. I can try and address specific questions, but yeah, like if you have a specific question, I can give it a shot.
What's your take on the proliferation of these private sector offensive actors? And, we see them popping up here and there. WhatsApp pops up with a threat intel report on some new group out of Greece and Macedonia and so on. Like you mentioned, there's not much pushback on your industry now, but the emergence of those and the noise around these quote unquote mercenary hacking firms, do you feel like it's affects your industry?
Yeah, you are right about that. As things emerge in the wild, everyone freaks out about it, and then basically sometimes policy comes out of it. So you'll recall, when the previous US administration just goes, you know what, these people are sanctioned, and they made an executive order about you can't buy from these people, or anyone that does this is in trouble, etc. So one of the things that had troubled me in the past was there'd be all this discussion about how policies should be made regarding Wassenaar agreements and Pall Mall and all these previous laws when people were discussing them. And they would have this group of security people talking about it and offering their advice, and often their, committees and stuff. And I found it completely crazy that in nearly every instance, there was like 0 people that worked in actual offense exploitation. I got the chance to participate in one of these not very long ago. So that was really good because, they had some experts from various different parts of the spectrum, but the people that weren't working in specifically offensive technology and were working more in application security, perhaps in the commercial space and even red teaming and stuff, was saying these things. I'm like, this is crazy and completely not actionable. Like, you can't do any of this. Like, so I was quite pleased to have the ability to try and put the brakes on some of the suggestions. But yeah, like I said, I find it insane how so many of those committees have basically no one in the space but everyone's talking about the space, and they're like, hey, maybe we should actually invite like literally anyone from that space and comment on this before we roll out a whole bunch of policies,
What covers it for me? Anything else, guys?
So who was a big
sorry, I dropped out
fan
for 1
of
second there.
who was a big fan of bird watching? Was it you or someone else?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
His microphone, his headphone isn't working.
I'm going into a tunnel.
Yeah.
Last question for you. Just let's wrap it up. Last question, and I let you go, Mark. When you the book, The Art of Software Assessment, does that still stand the test of time? And are there lessons from the book today that are still somewhat relevant? And then I had heard a rumor years ago that the book contained the ODE that no one had seen after many, many years. I think we're 20 years into publication of that book. Is that true?
Did it, at the time when it was published, it contained bugs that I hadn't reported. So I thought that was a real value add at the time, but
freebies.
Yeah. And obviously a lot of it is outdated now. There are a couple of core concepts that are still relevant, but a lot of it is has obviously changed quite a bit. If you're asking, does it stand the test of time? In a way, you could consider that it has, in that I'm sure it was significant part of the training material of OpenAI and Anthropic.
There you go. It helped to create mythos at some
You
point,
got
right?
some royalties there.
Yeah, I actually got an email at some point. I got a few of them. I don't even know how or why I got this email, but they're like, "Hey, are you an author? Like, we're doing a class action lawsuit against Anthropic or OpenAI, and if your book was conceivably used as material, you can join this." And I didn't do it, but I kind of thought about it. I was like, yeah, damn right. Like,
Dude, the book goes for like $200 to $300 on resale right now.
400.
yeah,
400? Yeah. I was hanging out with
It's
John.
20 years old. Can you believe it? It's 20 years old.
I need to like go dig out of the boxes as I moved in December and I still haven't unpacked my books, but like John's there and I'm like, John, you have to sign it, man. Imagine, if I get you to sign it, this thing is going to be a collectible at this point, right? Like,
that's right. Like, I gave away all my copies, so I didn't. The only copy that I really have is one in South Korean, which is not that useful to me. Yeah, I also have the volume one when they decided to break it into 2 volumes, and I only have that one because one day at Azimuth I saw it on someone's desk and I'm like, God damn it, I'm taking one, and I just stole it off. Yeah.
Great place to end it. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate the time. Appreciate your willingness to come and answer some of these crazy, tricky questions from some of us that know nothing. Many times we don't fact check and we don't know nothing. So it's always great to have an expert come and kind of educate us on.
No, it was really good.
Thanks
for having us, and look forward to seeing you guys again sometime soon in real life.
We'll come to Unprompted. Let's go to Australia for Unprompted.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. He
Thanks
says,
a lot, man.
this
Appreciate
motherfucker, don't listen to him. We're going to end up, Kostin and I are going to end up in
Me and the
Australia
probably
with a
going there.
fucking cardboard cutout of Ryan because he couldn't be bothered to get on the plane for that long.
It's too fucking far, man.
Don't listen to this motherfucker.
Never been to Australia.
The biggest fear I have of this conference at the moment is that the price of oil at that time is going to be out of control, and every international guest is just going to be like, fuck this.
Flights are going to be crazy, yeah.
Flights, they're already canceling flights. Lufthansa is canceling flights.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Don't say
Thanks,
shit,
guys.
I
We'll
gotta
talk.
get back.
Ciao.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, cool. See you later.